I'll just introduce myself real quick and then we'll jump into this. My name is Steve Barsh. Like many of you, actually, I'm a software engineer and computer scientist by training, although I haven't coded in about 10 or 15 years, which is a shame. But love doing software development. My background, a serial entrepreneur. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. I have a degree in computer science. I have a SWET MBA, I think a SWET law degree, a few different SWET degrees. I love early stage entrepreneurship. I love building companies. I'm the chief innovation officer these days at Dream It Ventures, which is a pretty big venture accelerator that's headquartered here in Philadelphia, but we run it in lots of different places. So I'm going to talk to you a lot about what we do at Dream It. Chris went through Dream It about forever ago. 8 years. Yeah, 8 years ago. And I'll tell you kind of the process and journey we take companies through at Dream It. If you don't know Dream It, I'll get started because a couple of the Dream It slides are in here. For any of you, if you didn't hear, there's the bit.ly link for this talk. If you go, it'll take you through DocSend. You just signed in, and you can at least follow along in the slides. You can't download them. We try not to do that because we find when everybody can download slides, they just drift away to everywhere. But you can follow along. You don't have to write down any notes. If you hear anything that's actually worthwhile to write down, so we'll see. And that's my contact info. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about Dream It because I just want to give you the mindset of the way that the world that we're thinking about in early stage startups. So it's a network dedicated to progress. It's an early stage accelerator. It's like Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 startups. That's the kind of model that it is. So it's entrepreneurs, investors, advisors, and customers in this massive network that we put together to help de-risk and think through early stage companies. Dream It really started down here, like a lot of accelerators, a new stage I never heard of before, the soil to seed stage. I'd never heard soil. That's from Paul Martino, if you know him from Bullpen Capital. He said, oh, you guys used to be soil investors, which was pre-seed. So we've done a lot in the soil to seed where we put a little money into an early stage company and put $25 or $50 or $75,000 in at the very, very beginning. We've moved a little bit. We still do that. We're now, though, mostly between seed and Series A when companies come in for acceleration. Again, just give you like a framework to understand. Right now, we have 25 companies in for acceleration. We have 15 digital health companies, 10 ed tech companies. The companies applied from 40 different countries around the world to get into Dream It, so our acceptance rate's a little below 3% these days. 75% of those companies have already raised their seed round. They're now trying to accelerate from seed into their Series A, and they're just worried about that gap of getting to Series A. So can we help them de-risk their model further, their customer base further, figure out their go-to-market strategy even further? So that's why you see us kind of hovering between those two stages. And it's a really interesting place to live. You know, they've already built a product. They have some level of product market fit, and their MVP is done, but now they're just trying to build and see if they can build a real company. So it's kind of an interesting place to be. These are just to give you a feel and something, because it's important when I'm talking to you, we find that these techniques apply in lots of industries. We've built companies in health, ed tech, finance, enterprise, and consumer. I heard lots of Vanguard people in here we've never built something on Vanguard side, but Level Up went through Dream It in 2008 and is still cranking along today. Octane Lending and Bungalow, lots of different companies in lots of different focus areas. Our biggest focus is these days, again, ed tech and health. And a lot of health companies running through right now. It's very interesting and exciting. And we've built about $1.2 billion in value as a venture portfolio in what we're doing. Okay, so that's enough about me and Dream It. Let me get into this. Chris saw this years ago. It's slightly revised since then, and I'll tell you what this is all about. Okay, this is really focusing on early stage companies, early stage ideas, and you say, I've got a great idea. So none of you here are in the health space, right? I'm going to do a health talk later today. So I think it's really important. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of early stage people, and they say, I've got a great idea. I want to talk to you. And one of my questions that's a little bit esoteric, is what's the definition of a great idea? I have a great idea. What does that mean? Like, this is just theoretical, and there is no right or wrong answer. It's a great idea. What do you think it makes? If somebody came to you, oh my God, I've got a great idea. What does that mean?
An idea that solves a problem.
An idea that solves a problem? Okay. Yes, it's an idea that solves a problem. What else makes a great idea? Chris? Okay, opportunity in the market to deploy an idea. What else? Yeah? Novel and useful. Yep. Cool. Anything? Yeah?
A dime a dozen.
Well, a dime a dozen meaning what? Anybody can come up with a good idea, and you're right, it can be. We find mostly it's execution. That's why you bet on the team. But I just want to tell you something that's important that I like to put out there as a disclaimer, particularly when we do this a lot in the health space. Everything that you just said, I'm going to tell you, the following idea qualifies as a great idea. In the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of physicians and a lot of pediatricians. And I've literally had pediatricians come up to me and say, it's a great idea if I can save a single child's life. It's a great idea and it's worth doing. And I tell them, you know what? You're right. It solves a problem, urgent need. It's not a dime a dozen as much. A lot of things that you just said, that would all qualify. And what I've said to them is, you're right, and I don't have that skill. If a child was lying, hit in the street, hit by a car, I could call 911 and apply direct pressure, and that's about it. I don't have that skill, and it's an amazing skill to have. That's still a great idea, but that doesn't mean it's a venture-backable idea. So a lot of the world that we live in is how do you build ideas that impact huge numbers of people? So I just want to put that out there, that doesn't mean you could have a great idea that's small and maybe doesn't get venture financing because the returns you have to do in venture are so huge, but that's not a litmus test. That's just a litmus test for what type of investment dollars you have to put behind it or what class of investment dollars. That doesn't mean if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And I like to just put that out there because it's an important thing. We see a lot of things, particularly in the digital health space, that we can't get behind because they're just not big enough or impactful enough, but they're still great ideas. Okay, so your roadmap when you have something along a great idea, what do you do? What's this talk going to be all about? We're going to talk about identifying assumptions and testing your assumptions. We're going to talk about sizing a market and estimating value. These are all important when you're trying to de-risk an idea. We're going to talk about briefly understanding your competition, planning for regulatory. We're going to probably skip that. That's more in the health space if you have to deal with FDA and HIPAA. Talking a little bit about building a product, getting traction, and pitching. Now I'm going to do a light treatment. This is an hour talk. A lot of times this is done as a 4-hour talk. I'm going to hit the real critical points here. Some of the things we won't go into a ton of detail because we don't have the time, but believe me, you'll get the rough idea. So here's this beautiful map that you're going to have to follow. But I think the first important thing, and Chris and many of you, I've known Chris for a long time. Many of you have probably worked on projects like this. Chris, I know, has worked on companies like this, that it's this beautiful map, but it's nothing like this. It's actually, in the early stage business, I find it's a lot more like whack-a-mole. You say, wow, I've got a really great idea and it's highly differentiated and solves a big problem. And then you do search for the competition, you're like, crap, there's 3 other companies already doing that. And you whack down that once. And you go back and you iterate and say, okay, well, nobody's doing this version of it. And you go through and you say, and there's no competition. And you say, oh, you know what, but the market size isn't big enough. So I generally find it's highly iterative approach when we go through this de-risking and when you follow this. So I just want to get that out there. The other thing is a lot of the early stage entrepreneurs we work with, so we're doing partner meetings with 25 companies a week right now, and we literally just started with them a week or 2 ago. And most of them are going through our first partner meetings with us, and what they're doing is they're trying to climb a wall, and generally what we're doing is we're knocking the pegs out of their hands and they start sliding, because we very openly and aggressively challenge all of their assumptions and ask them, what is your key assumption? And they start to get into this phenomenon where it feels like they're just sliding down an ice wall and they can't get control. So part of what we do at Dream It is we challenge assumptions and start making progress. But the idea is we start whacking on everything. What we're doing is, the way I think about it is we are pressure testing every single critical assumption within their business model as rapidly as possible. And they go through a 4-month process of that. And it is invigorating, but those partner meetings once a week are interesting, but not always the most fun thing. Sometimes you come out and they feel very defeated. But generally, it's a really good thing, and we produce great companies at the end. And I'll give you an example of that, by the way, in great companies. My favorite, I don't play favorites, but probably the most interesting company I ever did that with is SeatGeek. I don't know if any of you heard of SeatGeek. It's like Kayak for tickets, right? Okay, cool, a couple head nods. SeatGeek went through in 2009 through Dream It, and we did this massive, just challenging every assumption. About halfway to 3/4 of the way through the program, the 2 founders sat down with me in a partner meeting, and they said, you know, we've tested, and we'll talk about these assumptions and what I mean by this in a minute or two, but they said, we've tested all of our assumptions, and we've decided we're absolutely wrong. We've invalidated all of our assumptions. And they shut down one company midway through Dream It and started another one, and they started SeatGeek. And they said, well, we wanted your permission to start a different company. I was like, you don't need my permission. It's not my company, it's yours, but how can we help, and what are your key assumptions? And they built SeatGeek in a matter of the first iteration of it in about 6 weeks. So the process does work, and that's a major pivot. But anyway, so as you go through this journey, you follow this map, journey looks a lot more like a game of whack-a-mole. So here's the first key thing to talk about. I find, and you can't imagine how many dozens of times a week I say this, particularly at this phase of Dream It, because this cohort just started a couple weeks ago. What are your 2 or 3 key assumptions behind your idea? So it sounds like a really simple thing, and it is, And let me just tell you, earlier in my career talking about this, I used to say, what are your 7 to 10 assumptions? And then I said, what are your 5 to 7 key assumptions? And then I'd say, what are your 2 to 3 key assumptions? And a good friend of mine is Josh Koppelman. I've been in partner meetings with him. He nails it down to 1 assumption. He just says, an entrepreneur, that's a really great idea. What's the bet? You're typically betting on one thing. And if you're wrong, you're toast and you're dead. And I find a lot of entrepreneurs wander around in the early stage and they are not focused on the absolute most critical assumptions. And I generally find there's 2 or 3 critical assumptions that if you are wrong, you are burned toast. And I was in partner meetings last week with a dozen Dream It companies, literally saying, what's the 1 or 2 key assumptions? If you're wrong, you're toast. And these companies are really cool. And by the way, they're post-seed and they still have tons and tons of assumptions. So we spend a lot of time on that. So I want to drill into this because it's kind of the root of this talk today. Okay, who is this person? What's the company? What were the key assumptions? His last name is really spelled very differently than you pronounce it. Do you know who it is or what company? There's one little logo in there. That's the gift. It's Zappos. Okay, that's the CEO, Tony Hsieh, before he sold it to Amazon. By the way, Tony was not the founder. He was the VC and went in and took over the company because the original founder didn't want to keep running it and building it. I'm sure you all know Zappos. I'm sure you know Zappos a lot more than SeatGeek. If you know SeatGeek, you know Zappos. These shoes are from Zappos. Zappos started in about 1999. Anybody know what the 1 or 2 key assumptions behind Zappos was when they started that company? Anybody want to guess? So I got a definite nod. No, that's fine. And let me just tell you, to make it a little easier, Amazon was up and running. People were shopping online. They were already using credit cards online, buying books and music and videos and stuff. Yeah?
I would guess it had to do with the fact that they offered free returns.
Okay, free returns. So,
Still be able to make money.
and okay, so there's an assumption they'd still be able to make money?
Better customer service could beat Amazon?
Okay, better customer service could beat Amazon. I'll give you close. I'll give you a hint that'll lead you to the path. Amazon wasn't selling shoes at the time, so they didn't really have to worry about beating Amazon.
People want to buy shoes online.
People want to buy shoes online, or people will buy shoes online. That was the most critical assumption they had. Anybody know the backstory on Zappos? If you don't, it is a great story. So here's what Zappos did. Their most critical assumptions was people will buy shoes online. Now, most entrepreneurs I meet with, particularly those of us that have like degrees in computer science, are really geeky and love doing software development, I still do. And you should see the smart home project I'm working on right now with my kids and Zigbee and getting everything to work. Anyway, so that's my geekiness these days. My kids think I'm great at that and they should meet you. But anyway, so their most critical assumption, people are going to buy shoes online. So here's what Zappos did. They went down to the local shoe store, grabbed some shoes, took an early primitive digital camera, took digital pictures of the shoes and built a piece of crap website and threw the shoes up on the website. Right? They bought some traffic, and I can't remember if it was in Yahoo or Google. AdWords might not have been up at the time. It might have just been Yahoo. And they bought some traffic into the site because they wanted to set up an experiment to answer a question. What's the question they wanted to answer? Will people buy shoes online? Now, here's most of the people I know that come up with a great idea. They'd come to somebody like me or a VC or some accelerator and say, I've got a great idea. So I'm going to build this website, and it's an e-commerce, and we're going to kill it. We're going to sell shoes online. So here's what I need, $1 million. You know why? I need to hire a rock star software development team. I need some developers like the people that are in this room, really awesome. I need 3 warehouses, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, to hold all of my shoes. So I need to lease those warehouses, and I need to fly around and go meet with Nike, Adidas, K-Swiss, I think they're still around, all these people, because I need to sign big contracts. I need $1 million to $3 million and then marketing campaign. And that's what I need to do. And then somebody like me says, I'm sorry, what are your key assumptions? And I tend to just go and just like pop the original plan in a really big way. So what Tony Hsieh and that team did is they took some digital pictures, threw up and put together a piece of shit website, threw shoes on it, bought traffic from Yahoo, put people down through the process to see if they buy shoes online. They came up with the idea around then, well, people really aren't buying. What if we gave them free returns? I mean, so we'll just take the risk away. So a lot of those early ideas, by the way, how many days do you have to return your shoes for free? 365 days. You have a full year. So they were the first one that really pioneered that, like how long can we keep the people on the phone and talk to them? All of that was Zappos' early pioneering, trying to figure out how can we do it. When you would buy your shoes online from them, they would literally go running down, and you can read the book about it. They run down to Athlete's Foot and Foot Locker, buy the sneakers or tennis shoes at full retail, put them in a box, ship them, and go, I wonder if we could do that again. Because at the end of it, their key assumption was people will buy shoes online. And it began and ended there. And if they were wrong, they were dead. So most entrepreneurs I see will sit there drifting around, working on all these big things, but not attacking their key assumptions. So at Dream It, we beat up entrepreneurs all day long if they get into Dream It and just pressure test all of the most key assumptions. Okay, so that's the Zappos story. Please don't forget it. I use it a lot because it helps ground me around key assumptions. Okay, and hopefully that goes away. So here are some common mistakes that I find entrepreneurs make. By the way, there's bonus points in here. I like movie references, or this isn't a movie reference. Anybody know what the graphic is here about mistakes? It's when pigs fly. It is when pigs fly. It's the, yeah, good. It's the flutog. You know, somebody actually, this slide, I write most of Mun's slides. A friend of mine wrote this slide. I was like, what the hell is that? It's the Red Bull flutog. Don't you know what that is? I was like, I'm definitely not hip anymore. Yes, it's the flutog where you have to build a contraption that somehow flies through the air, and this didn't go very well. But anyway, so what are the common mistakes we see entrepreneurs and I see entrepreneurs make at this early stage? They don't understand even what their key assumptions are. They don't de-risk critical assumptions before building the full product and before pitching investors. They don't use out-of-box techniques. They are very linear, and instead of trying to come around from the side to figure it out, they go head on at it and don't think out of box. They ask for money for too early, and they look for validation for investors. They'll go and start meeting with angels and investors, pitching the idea to them, almost testing the idea with investors. Like, do you think this is a great idea? And a lot of times in the spaces we work in, particularly ed tech and digital health, the investor isn't the target customer. They don't know if it's a good idea. What did your potential customer say? So these are some common mistakes. This is one of my favorite ones that we use, particularly in the digital health area, right? That, you know, everybody says, if we build it, they will come. And generally what we find is that's not true, right? It's not a field of dreams. You build it, you roll it out. There's a couple companies that will remain nameless at Dream It right now that have got huge dev efforts. They've got 5, 6, 10-person dev teams, and they're coding and coding and coding. And I was like, but what is your most key fundamental assumption? You're building all of this functionality, but you're not out in the market learning. What is the cheapest MVP that you can roll out that's got basic functionality that you can start learning? Because if you're coding and you don't have it in a user's hands, you're learning nothing. And it's all based on assumptions. And I get really nervous. Well, once we roll it out, people will come pounding it. Happens sometimes, but generally not. Reminds me, let me try to, one sec. I want to show you a great example. Well, I'll bring it up later, actually. It just reminds me of something. Okay, and this is another one, right? So I see people all the time. Again, this is more health-oriented slides. Like every doctor's going to want. Hands are up high. And I used to use a different slide in this talk before. And I see entrepreneurs a lot. They're like this. They're waving hands. It's this financial software. Everybody's going to want it. I mean, everybody. And the hands are like this. And I say, you have to put your hands down. You're not allowed to wave your hands. You look like an idiot, and I don't believe you. Particularly me, I've seen, just so you know, if you want an interesting statistic, this cycle of Dream It, 1,300 entrepreneurs from 40 countries applied for 25 slots. And you meet with so many people, and it's like all of this hand waving. It's like, put your hands down. Just put your hands down. Point at data. So we'll talk about that, but you can't do this. You've got to point. And we'll talk about that and how we do it at Dream It and how you can do it too. So we don't want you to look at. So here's first this is a movie reference. Extra bonus points. I got a head nod. Yes, movie. Monty Python. Which one? Holy Grail. What scene? Big nasty teeth. The killer rabbit, right? Killer rabbit. He's got big, it's just a harmless bunny. No, he's big, he's really nasty. Okay, so that's the killer rabbit there. That killer rabbit is what I see kill early stage startups all the time. So here's what I want you to watch out for. Here's with the de-risking goals. I want you to figure out how do you convert your assumptions into knowledge as quickly and cheaply as possible. Think about what Tony Hsieh did with Zappos. By the way, there was a Philly company, Quidsi, I forget how you pronounce their name. Diapers.com, many of you know that was Mark Lohr, and he spun it out of Wharton. He's working on a new company, you may have heard of it, called Jet.com, because he sold Diapers.com and Wag and all that and soap to Amazon. Now he's working on this next one. We'll see if that works. I don't know if any of you have used Jet. It is significantly cheaper than Amazon, a lot, for household products. But what they did at diapers, same type of thing. They put diapers up online and people would start buying them. They'd run to Costco and Walmart and figure out how to fulfill them, but they didn't inventory and stuff. So I want you to think about any idea you're working on, whether you're working at Vanguard, any of your companies, you're working on your own idea. How can you take your assumptions and convert them into knowledge as quickly and cheaply as possible? Realize as assumptions go down, value goes up. That's true of anything, any company, anywhere. And if people want to take pictures, you're welcome to. You can tweet at DreamIt or at sbarsh, by the way. But anyway, as assumptions go down, value goes up. That's true, right? If I'm a publicly traded company, as my assumptions about my next quarter go down, my value goes up, right? It's true about any phase in the life cycle of a company. I want you to think about how to consume your intellectual capital before venture capital. Everybody says, I need 100,000, I need $1 million. Why? What are the experiments that you want to run? And we'll use that framework in a minute. And you have to know when to proceed and when to pivot. And this is hard as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs tend to get very, very stubborn on their ideas, and it's hard to let go and pivot. But sometimes when you start getting massive negative signaling, like this company Scribnia, which is what SeatGeek originally came into DreamIt, was Scribnia. And they finally decided, we've got to put it to bed. We've invalidated every assumption that we had. This is going nowhere. So these are the goals of de-risking. Stay away from the evil bunny. If you see him, stay away. So this is the way I like to think about it, right? How many of you remember in elementary school, right? Even if you're not a scientist today, what's the scientific method? Do you remember the definition? You should have learned this in about 5th or 6th grade. What's the scientific method? You form a hypothesis, and then you set up a experiment to what your hypothesis? Prove or disprove. Right. It's amazing how we all learn, like prove and test or prove or disprove your hypothesis. That's it. Right. So that's all this de-risking approach is. I have a hypothesis. Everybody's going to want shoes. People will buy diapers online. I have a hypothesis. People will buy and sell tickets online. And they're all just a hypothesis. I love this when we work with physician scientists. There are a lot of people at DreamIt these days on the health side that are all MD, PhDs. And they're like, I don't need to worry about all this crap. It's not the science side of it. It's like, well, think of it like science. You have a hypothesis, set up an experiment to prove or disprove your hypothesis. This time it's a business hypothesis. The same mindset works. So anyway, need to be curious. So in common assumptions, the bigger mistake I see of where the mouse gets killed trying to get the cheese is on the market risk, not the technical risks. I find things can be built. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that people care. So if you go back, and we do this with DreamIt all the time, and I've done this for 10, 20 years with companies, that is, by the way, the #1 place this lives and dies. Do people care? I'm not worried as much about the competition and everything else, because if people don't care and you can't figure that out, you're done, whether that's B2C or B2B. So I don't worry about the technical, I worry more on the market, because that's where I find companies get killed, is on the market risks. So in people caring, some things to think about in market risks. Are you filling an unmet, compelling need? And we're going to come back to that in a minute. People talked about when I said what makes a good idea. It's a big problem, it's a big need, that type of thing. Does it fit into the existing customer workflow? Anybody know what I mean by that? Yeah?
Is it hard? Do you have to go out of your way to use it?
Yeah, do you have to go out of your way? Is it a huge, significant change to the way you're doing things? Sometimes that can work, but usually it doesn't. It's important in health. We see a lot of parallels, by the way, between health and ed tech. If you have a teacher who has to significantly change the way they're running a classroom, the school has to significantly change something, the physician has to significantly change, a lot of times it doesn't work really well. We had a really interesting company go through DreamIt Health last cycle, VisXcel. It was a specialty related to mammograms for advanced breast cancer and doing things. And the entrepreneurs came in, and it was really cool. They had no background in radiology, mammograms, nothing. They came from the software world. As a matter of fact, they used to work for Toys R Us and a whole bunch of different companies. It was really interesting. And came at it from a very orthogonal view. And they were coming out with this software, and I said, I have a question. The way that you're saying, well, radiologists are going to use it this way, and they'll do that. I was like, I have a question. Have you ever in your life been in a radiology reading room at a hospital? They said, no. I said, great, do me a favor. You have some friends at Einstein. We've got friends at Penn. Do me a favor. Schedule a visit, not 3 weeks from now, not 3 months from now. And the next week, I want you to spend an hour in a radiology reading room. Get in. Have you ever been in there? It's like, it looks like a casino, by the way. It's all dark. There's no windows. There's a million monitors going on. They're not gambling, not that kind of, but it's like just weird because it's low and it's dark. And a typical radiologist, any idea how long a radiologist gets to read a film or digital film in a reading room? Yeah, 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. They're like, oh my God, they're like factory workers. They go so fast. And these guys went into that reading room and they came back out the next day. They're like, holy shit. I was like, right, they're going to do your stuff, then walk over to the other workstation, upload the image, go do this. Like, you're sitting there uploading, getting ready. They just missed doing 3 scans and they get paid and reimbursed by scan. didn't fit in the workflow. And then they re-engineered the whole product to fit in the workflow, and they're doing well now and just closed around. But anyway, so fitting in the customer workflow is important to understand what the workflow is. Is it a big market? That's more towards the VC side. That big market usually means there's got to be about $100 million of activity or more. Market risks around competition. You can enter competitive markets. Uber went into a market filled with competitors, right? Taxi cabs. But that's okay. You can have competition. You just have to differentiate. Is there a willingness to pay, or is it reimbursable? Will somebody pay for your solution? Just a quick note, I just want to highlight, and I'm just trying to hit the things I'm trying to think about the last 10 conversations I had at Dream It this week. Before you're worried about willingness to pay, by the way, the first thing I go back to is, does anybody care? Right? Because everybody's like, well, what's my business model? Well, how about this? I actually don't give a shit what your business model is, because if nobody is buying it, 0 times your business model is 0. Okay? So it's there. You absolutely have to figure out how you're going to monetize, depending on what the business model is. But the first thing is, does somebody care? Then that last point is, how compelling? So it said at the beginning, do you fit an unmet compelling need? So if you're doing a typical business system in your B2B in particular, there's 3 ways. And I got this from Brad Feld at Foundry Group that's in Boulder, Colorado. I read this from him years ago, and credit where credit's due. He'll say, well, are you selling vitamins, aspirin, or antibiotics? You know, it's a nice to have, need to have, or a must have. You know, if I didn't take my vitamin this morning, I'm still standing and I'm alive, right? An aspirin, I have a headache, it's kind of painful, I'll take an aspirin, it goes away. And there's my Z-Pack that if I don't take it and I don't take my antibiotics, I'll get sick and possibly could die. So just think about, you know, you've got a great idea, is it a compelling need, but how compelling is it? Okay, so just think about that. And of course you want the gold star, you want to be a must-have. And a lot of times it's hard to have a must-have. Most things are nice to have, need to have, and that means you need to price them appropriately. But that's some things about when you're thinking about de-risking your idea and you say, it's a really important problem. And then I'll say, well, how important is it? How compelling is it? Okay, is what you want to think about. Now, as we go through this journey of de-risking and thinking about assumptions, we're going to talk about showing people things early on. So I don't know if any of you have heard this Henry Ford quote, right? If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Because we're about to start talking about, you know, the Steve Blank going out and meeting with customers and talking with customers, kind of classic lean startup methodology. So I've heard people say this, so we put the quote in here, you know, Henry Ford's famous line. Now here's the funny thing, I actually looked this up before we put the slide in. Turns out Henry Ford never said this. It turns out he's just attributed to say it, and it was like on Snopes or something. If you go to they went to the Henry Ford Museum and said, did he actually ever say this? No, people just credit him that he would have said something like that, but he didn't. But we're gonna get into this. So what we're about to start talking about are things like prototypes and talking to customers. So one of the things that we push, and I push very, very hard at Dream It for early stage companies, and I've touched hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands at this point, in my life is, I want you to go out and talk to customers early. And it is never too early to go out and talk to a customer. And I'm not going to ask you to go out and ask them, you know, ask people, what do you want? We're going to talk about taking prototypes or just taking words or sitting down and doing a description. Because I could take somebody and I could take some model and say, you know, this isn't a car, you know, I'm building something called a car, I'm Henry Ford, and just imagine, you know, this is a bad example, but it has wheels on it, it's just a model. I mean, but imagine instead of a horse, it doesn't crap all over the place, you put gasoline in, it runs smoothly, it's got a top on it, it stays warm in the elements, you stay dry. This is a thing called a car. Is that something you'd need? Would you want that? Is it interesting to you? Would you buy it? How much would you be willing to pay? Does it solve a big problem for you? No, my horse is fine. I just need a faster horse. Now, I didn't ask that, but I'm going to start talking about what are the early ways that you can get rapid feedback by showing people very basic things. So let me give you, this again, it's all about de-risking. You've got assumptions. What are the fastest ways you can kill off those assumptions and turn them into knowledge as quickly and cheaply as possible? So I want you to go out and meet with customers. Now, we have a whole separate presentation on meeting with customers that we go through with Dream It companies that we have as a recorded webinar now. It's really cool. But some ground rules. So first of all, when I say talking to customers, I mean talking to customers. So first, face-to-face versus a survey. So I wind up meeting with a bunch of physicians. They're like, got it, need to get input from customers. Cool, I'm going to do a survey monkey, send it to 200 EMTs and see what they think. And I say, sorry, it doesn't count. Doing a survey monkey, I want you to sit across the table and describe your idea to people in the beginning stages and get feedback. Sorry, it doesn't scale, and it's slow, but it's very valuable. I want you to observe people's body language. Yes, go ahead.
At this point, are you making a distinction between like the end users versus the payers?
It's a great question. I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to come to that. He said, are you making a distinction between the end users and the payers? And you didn't mean payers in a healthcare system. You meant the buyer,
Well, I meant,
like the person who buys. We're talking about that in a minute. Yep. So look, actually, I'll answer it now. It depends, right? So my first thing is, if I'm dealing in a healthcare system, if a surgeon's not going to use it, I don't have to worry about talking about the buyer. But do I have that slide in here? No, we don't. So there's a slide we have is the person who benefits is often different than the person who pays. There's a picture of like a grandmother holding her grandchild and the grandchild's holding an ice cream cone, right? The person who benefits is very different from the person who pays. You have to convince both. So we wind up talking to both. And I think I'll have a little bit on that. So I want to observe body language in these meetings. Is the person leaning into the discussion? If you look under the table, is their foot shaking back and forth like a puppy wagging its tail, or are they cross-armed and like, don't give you the time of day? I want to figure out if they're excited by the idea that we're talking to them about. One of the important rules that I suggest that you use, that we have Dream It companies use all the time, and we use it at Dream It itself, you can't hurt my feelings. So we'll go into an early customer meeting and say, look, we want to run this idea past you, or might show you some early prototypes and mock-ups. And some of the ideas we work on and companies work on these days seem outstanding. I mean, if we have a couple of minutes at the end, I'll tell you a couple of companies that are Dream It. They're just like breathtaking ideas. Really awesome. But one of the things is we say to those people, we ask the entrepreneurs, when you're meeting with these people, you've got to tell them, look, here's something really important you need to know. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you can't possibly hurt my feelings with your answer. Why do we do that? Why do you think it's important to say that?
So they talk freely?
So they talk freely. Because what do most people want to do? They want to be encouraging and
Nice.
That's great, you should keep doing that. And they give you like your mom or your dad, that's terrific. Well, my mom and dad are like, wait, how are you going to pay the bills if you're an entrepreneur? But it worked. Anyway, but they'll be encouraging. And the worst thing you can get as an entrepreneur is a false positive. Oh yeah, I'd absolutely use that. It's terrific. What we encourage Dream It entrepreneurs to do, and you can do yourself, is you're looking for the negativity. You're like, bring it on, bring it back to me. Why wouldn't you use this? I mean, what isn't good about it? Tell me the negative and challenges, because it makes you tougher. It's like sitting there like in MMA, like just constantly getting punched. And you get better and better and stronger and stronger. And again, Dream It companies, and they go through for 4 months. By the time, at the end of Dream It, by the way, we do Destination Dream It. We did it 2 weeks ago. We took them all to a dude ranch in the Poconos. It was really wild. We do weeks of customer immersions. They're doing customer immersions right now. The last 2 weeks of Dream It, the 25 companies will go on a roadshow. So we still do a demo day, but it's really downplayed in our program. The last 2 weeks, they'll go to New York, Boston, Washington, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and they'll meet with dozens of VCs, one-on-one meetings to get their next round of financing. And we find in particular, by the time they're on the West Coast, going through Dream It and meeting with great Kleiner Perkins and Andreessen Horowitz and NEA and Norwest, they're getting pummeled with questions. And it's like the Matrix. They're like, go, it's like it's really cool. They're really used to it. So anyway, you want the negativity earlier on when you're meeting with customers. So you can't hurt my feelings. We generally say when you're doing these types of early stage meetings, ask for 20-minute meetings. Never send an email if you're trying to secure, do you have an hour? I want to pick your brain. So 2 things, don't ask for an hour, don't even ask for a half hour. Ask for 20 minutes. The lower the ask, the more response that you'll get. Please don't ever use the expression, I want to pick your brain. I hate when people do that to me. It is the most lopsided, one-sided, hey, can I sit down? I want to pick your brain for half an hour. Yeah, what's in it for me? Except my brain gets picked. So we just asked for 20-minute meetings. Entrepreneur in the last cycle started calling them, she had a TLA for it, right? TMMs. I was like, what's a TMM? A 20-minute meeting. And TLA, is a 3-letter acronym. It's recursive. Figure with that kind of crowd, I can do recursion. Anyway, all right, so ask for 20 minutes. Remember, you have 1 mouth and 2 ears. You want to listen twice as much as you speak. You want to ask open-ended questions versus yes-no questions. You wouldn't say, would this work? You'd say, how could we get this to work? You want to ask big open-ended questions, not closed questions when you're talking to customers. So those are just some general ground rules. Here's the typical types of questions we ask when we're de-risking early and meeting with customers early. Hey, is this a pain for you? Yes. Okay, there's a closed-ended question. Well, how big a pain is it? Like, how much pain does this cause you during the day? And I'll give you some war stories just from the last year of where we've seen things fail in this process. Not fail, get de-risked. How big a benefit would this provide? How do you solve the problem today? I mean, you're dealing with this today. How do you solve it? What are pain points with existing solutions? When would and wouldn't you use it? How frequently? How many would you buy? What would you be willing to pay if you want to be brave enough to ask those types of questions. And we do thresholding. Would you be willing to pay $7 to $9 a month or $19 to $29? That's thresholding is one way. Or you could just ask open-ended, what would you be willing to pay? What's your cost of existing solutions? How would it fit in the workflow? A couple of interesting questions at the end. So wait, let me go back on the left. We jumped in on a project that was focused on the dermatology space for pediatricians. And the business model behind it, one of the assumptions was, and they've been working on this project for well over a year, that pediatricians would use the product, a typical pediatric practice with 6 pediatricians. Sorry, speaking of pediatricians, nope, okay. Say her son's at CHOP for an appointment. I said, call me if it's an emergency. They said, well, the pediatricians will probably use it 10 to 12 times a day. And it was all the business model was built on that. So finally we convinced them, let's go out and meet with a pediatrician, like my kid's pediatrician, and start asking. And it was so interesting because we went through and described the solution, and the physician was there and talked about it and said, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we would probably use it. And then we said, really? How big a benefit and how frequently would you use it? It's like, once or twice a week. It was a pay-per-use app, by the way. It'll be $1 per use. Wait, you have 6 physicians? You use it once or twice a week? And the whole business model imploded right then and there. And then it was like, okay, pivot. But by the way, they've been working on it for a year, building all the software, building the software, building the software, building the software. It's like, what's your key assumption? Anyway, so that's an example on the left. On the right, when you're doing these types of meetings, just some fun things to do towards the tail end of these customer meetings when you're de-risking. Number 1, I'd like to ask the question, hey, if you had a magic wand and could fix anything about what we're doing in finance or dermatology or whatever space you're working in or fluidics, if you had a magic wand and could fix anything, is there anything else you can think of that we could fix that's a really big pain point? 1 out of 10 times you get an interesting answer, because you let people's minds go free. Like, what's the real big pain in the ass for you? Another thing that we do, and I'll tell you an interesting project I worked on a couple years ago, who are 2 or 3 other people that you think we should speak with? So myself and a woman, Mo Rinkunis, who's also at Dream It Now, who's phenomenal, we were working on a project that CHOP asked us to come in on this 3D pediatric imaging, and we wound up meeting in 2-3 weeks. We met with 36 physicians to talk about 3D printing of patient hearts and models and all kinds of things based on MRI. And it was interesting. At the tail end of every meeting, we'd say, hey, that was really interesting. Thank you. You're a radiologist. You specialize in cardiac radiology. Cool. Really appreciate your time. By the way, are there 2 or 3 other people you think that we should meet with that would find this kind of interesting that we could talk to? Oh, yeah, sure. There's Bob and Mary. Cool. And by the way, if you just tell me where they are, University of Alabama and Arizona State, cool. And I'll figure out their email addresses. And if I don't, I'll let you know. And I'm going to do a self-intro if that's okay. I don't want to waste your time. I mean, if it's okay with you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot them an email. I'll CC you. So I'm not even going to ask you for the intro because it slows me down, and I don't want to put work on you, right? And we'll do self-intros. So we in 3 weeks spoke with 36 physicians, and people are like, "How did you know 36 physicians?" And we just blossomed it out. It's a very, very effective strategy that we use a lot. So. Anyway, so the 2 or 3 other people you think we should speak with, please ask at the end of these types of meetings where it's not just a one-way exchange, how can I help you? People will fall off their chair if you do that. Really appreciate your time. By the way, in what we're doing in this financial and mutual fund software, it's really cool. The startup idea we're working on, by the way, what can we do to help you? They'd be like, what do you mean? Well, you've given us a lot of value. What can I do for you? And don't forget to ask why 5 times. Any answer you get, particularly a negative answer, just keep drilling down on it and do some root cause analysis. Okay, let me pick up the pace a little bit so we leave time for questions and answers. When you're briefing a customer, you're going in and doing these customer meetings, it's all about de-risking your critical assumptions. One of the easiest ways to start is just brief the problem. Describe the key problem solved, unique benefits of the solution, show a workflow, mock-up, MVP. Let me break into this and show you what I mean. Positioning statement. If you don't know how to do one of these, take a picture of this. This is just from a Jeffrey Moore Crossing the Chasm. If you don't know what a positioning statement is, we have all the Dream It companies, all 25 of them from all their countries around the world, all rewriting their overview paragraphs and positioning statements because none of them get this right. Who's your target customer? What's the need or opportunity? The Kermit PPI, Physician Preference Items application, delivers these key benefits, 1, 2, 3 in priority order. Unlike X, Y, and Z in the marketplace, our unique selling point, what sets us apart is we do 1, 2, 3, right? That is a simple thing to do when you're working on early startup ideas. I find sometimes people spend a half day arguing this. It's fine. Glad you like that point. Thank you. Anyway, they'll go through it, and you can literally sit down with a group of physicians, finance people, whatever, and just say, here's what I'm thinking of doing, and just describe the positioning statement. And they'll say, that really isn't a big problem for me. Or have you thought about this competition? We were doing this last year again. I'll just go back to digital health because I've been doing a lot over the last year or two, and I've only been doing health companies for the last 3 years. We sat down, we were at Jefferson talking about this advanced genomics project and RNA sequencing instead of DNA, and sat down and said, unlike this, this, and this was the competition. And the people at there said to us, well, what about N of 1 and what about foundation medicine? And we're like, those are good points. We should really keep those in mind as we do this. I walked out, standing there next to the head of genomics from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I was like, who's N of 1 in foundation medicine? He goes, I have no idea. I said, maybe we should find out. And it turned out there were these 2 huge, massive competitors, and then we got to play the game of whack-a-mole, right? Like, oh shit, boom. You're like, wait, what is massive competition doing exactly what they're thinking of doing? So that's a positioning statement, and it's very powerful. You can take your workflow, map out how the workflow is going to work, and bring it into this situation. Would this work on a trading floor? Would it work in fluidics? Would it work in whatever industries you're working in? And show workflow map. A very powerful thing if you're building minimum viable products or MVPs, can you show a fake front end to try to get feedback? This is even before an MVP. You can use things like PowerPoint, a Google Doc form, a prototype, and fake it till you make it. Very, very powerful. We see companies do this all the time. It's like smoke testing, right? Just show a fake front end just to get feedback and show people how you'd interact. And by the way, we have till 5, right? It's 4 to 5? Okay, all right. And I stand between you and cocktails, right? So I'm not in a good place. I'll pick up the piece. I promise. Here's a great example of using mock-ups. So this is a mock-up. This actually, it was done in PowerPoint. It was a mock-up of a mobile. You can use Balsamiq. There's a million tools to do mock-ups, sketches. This is really cool. This wasn't ours. It was from IDEO. And IDEO, this is an ENT gun for doing a procedure for an ENT. And they were working at IDEO. They were working with a bunch of ENTs, and somebody was describing what this gun would look like. So the person grabbed, there's some of you old enough in the room would know what that is. That's a 35 millimeter canister for film, and in high school people use them for things besides film, but we won't talk about that. Anyway, so film, and it had a magic Expo Erase marker and a paper clip, and said, wait, you mean something like this? And they taped the thing together. And for 2 weeks they'd walk around with ENTs and say, the gun that kind of looks like this, and that became the multi-million-dollar product. But the first 2 weeks, that's what it looked like, right? That's early stage de-risking. That's getting feedback with spending, like that's out of box thinking, right? That's how you do it. Okay, another way you can do it for B2C companies, you can do online testing. You're trying to test assumptions that people care. This is where you can buy traffic and drop them to a fake landing page like LaunchRock. There's a million landing page generators these days. We find people, look, every mom who has a child with type 2 diabetes, they're all going to want it. Cool, do me a favor, take your credit card, buy a set of tests, buy keywords on Google AdWords, or buy it on Facebook for, wait, who's your target demographic? Well, it's moms, probably between the age of 25 and 35. They're college educated and they've got 2 kids. Okay, cool. Buy that traffic on Facebook, target those keywords, see if anybody clicks on your ad for that product, and when they drop on the landing page, let's see if anybody clicks and comes through. You can just test intent, and then you drop them on a landing page, coming soon, thanks, interesting, but you're just trying to test intent, and you're always trying to think of what are those hacky ways for finding out. So you can buy it off of a number of different networks. Another thing to keep calm and fake it till you make it, fake backends. So you can fake out the front end, you can fake out the back end. Don't know if any of you have ever done this. Fake back end where it's people, not software. Fake back end using Mechanical Turk. Fake back end using minimum viable product. I know I'm being slightly recorded, but I'll tell you, Justin Goldman, Zoomer. Do you know his new startup? Yeah. In the Naval Park. I don't know if any of you know Zoomer, you probably don't. It's a very quiet, laying low startup in Philly. They're kind of being the Uber for food delivery, but it's very different. What Justin's going after is, it's the pizza shop with 4 16-year-olds that drop off pizza all night long doing delivery, and he goes in and basically is able to outsource that. He's not trying to be accretive to a restaurant saying, now we'll deliver your food. He's trying to take the pain point away of hiring your own drivers that are, all teenagers, they never show up on time, they crash, and he's doing that. I remember the first time I went in and saw the early version of Zoomer after he went through Y Combinator, and I went in his office and they had, dozens of customers using it. And they had the whole front end and the pizza shop will put in, the order needs to go here and there. And have you ever visited his office at the Naval Yard? Okay. So have you seen they have like an air traffic control center, right? And it's these monitors and screens, and they had all these interns in there. Bob, go to the pizza shop and go pick up the pizza and deliver it to Mary. Sally, go pick up the hoagie order and go deliver it there. I was like, wait a second, what's going on? He goes, oh, the whole back end, it's all fake. it's just, they're dialing and smiling, dying and smiling. The whole thing, because what they were trying to do was prove that restaurants wanted a delivery service they could deliver. It's like, we can build the software, it's not easy, and Rob had a lot of software to build, and he's built a lot of it now. But they faked out the whole back end. None of it was real, right? Because that's not their biggest pain point. It's like, we can build it, do restaurants want this? And will customers use it? And can we create a great user experience? So that's a great example of fake backend. Okay, many of you heard this. It's not my graphic. It's this guy, Henrik Nyberg. I love this for MVP. Well, we're going to build an MVP. Right? Just remember, when you're building a minimum viable product, I think it's great. It's not like this. Well, look, I have the wheel for a car, so I've got an MVP. But it doesn't do a full unit of function. It doesn't do a full unit of work. Like, each one, it has to deliver a full functionality. I built a skateboard, a scooter, a bicycle, a motorcycle, and eventually it's a car. But it's minimum viable, and I keep going. Because I want to show that minimum viable product, and we talk about this at DreamIt incessantly with companies. Get your MVP, get it out there, get it in the hands of customers, get the MVP of Dropbox or the MVP of Airbnb, get it out there and get it in people's hands. That reminds me, is the pace okay? I want to show you something real quick. If I just show you an example of like MVPs and fake it till you make it and all this fakey kind of stuff. Let me find it one sec. You can watch me search for it live. Dropbox, MVP. Is this it? Hold on. Let me just see if I can find this really quick. It's great. No. Where's the video? There it is. Okay, hold on. Any of you ever seen this? Do you know what I'm about to show you? No? Okay, hold on. Oh, wait. Hold on. I don't have audio hooked in. And is there any audio here? You don't have audio. She doesn't even hear me. I'm just going to make it really loud on my Macintosh, and maybe you can hear it. Hold on one sec. Let's see if you can hear this. If not, I'll give it a little bit of a voiceover.
Okay, my name's Drew, and I'll be showing you a quick tour of Dropbox, which is a new way to store and share files online. What makes Dropbox different is that it just works, and there isn't any complicated setup or interface to learn. So let's get started. I've already installed Dropbox on a Windows PC and put a bunch of files in, and now I want to sync these files to my Mac. So to do that, I just installed Dropbox, and now I'm linking my Mac to my account.
Just give it about a minute. I won't show you the whole thing.
So in a second, my account will be linked, and you can see that the files that were on my Windows PC will start coming down. And what we're looking at is my Dropbox folder, which looks and acts like any other folder except for two things. One, these little green icons that indicate files are up to date. And two, anything in my Dropbox is synced across all of my computers and to the web.
30 more seconds.
And you'll notice that when I make changes, everything syncs up pretty quickly. And as another example, I'm going to log in my Windows PC, where you'll see that not only are the changes from my Mac already here, but if I make another change to a file, so for example, this picture of a platypus, and then I hit save, the change begins uploading immediately. And when I go back to my Mac, the change is reflected in a matter of seconds. So the point is, if you...
Okay, pretty cool. It's fake. That was the video he made as a mock-up to show what Dropbox would do, because every investor he met with, think back in the day, Chris, before Dropbox, how many of you before Dropbox? Why the hell do I need that? That's why we have FTP. You just FTP it up, you FTP it down. Nobody believed him that anybody would want it. He met with investors like, I'm not putting money behind this. This is ridiculous. Who needs this? Like, wow, I lost my USB stick and da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, that's why we have USB sticks. And he literally created that, put it out there, and I think put it on TechCrunch and a couple places, and said, if you're interested in a beta sign up, click here to sign up. Put it out one night, next morning there was 50,000 signups. Like, I think people are kind of interested. That's completely fake. It was all an animation. There was nothing real that you just saw. But it's really powerful. By the way, it's amazing how close that looks to the real thing, although it's from Macintosh like 10 years ago, and that's kind of obvious. But anyway, I think it's just a really good example. So, okay, let me go back to my normally scheduled stuff. Right, so if it's good enough, if these techniques, by the way, work for Zappos and Dropbox and all these guys, maybe it could work for the rest of us. Okay. Okay, let me keep going, and then we're almost done. Technical risks. So we've been talking all about market risks and de-risking. Yes, there are technical risks. The science is going to work, the software is going to work, the devices, Internet of Things are going to work, that you can build it, you can get it to market in time. We do see things at DreamIt that are like 3 and 4 years of software development, they think, or engineering, which is very market risk, where you like have this long open gap while you're trying to get something to work. That it's scalable. Is there some secret sauce that you have that's protectable? Not everybody has secret sauce that's protectable. A lot of companies don't. Airbnb does not have secret sauce that's protectable. Uber, as far as I think about it, I mean, I'm sure some of their algorithms, there's no secret sauce. It's just getting to scale. If you're in the healthcare world, there's clinical data and regulatory issues you have to deal as well. But I'm more worried, again, about the market stuff. I'm going to whip through, don't worry, we're not going to hit everything as heavily. So you test your assumptions, right? You size the market. Just some quick things about market sizing. I want to just tell you more traps where I see entrepreneurs get caught when market sizing. Market size is really simple. I used to teach at Wharton and I taught there because I don't have an MBA, I just do the pragmatic version. Market size is what's your slice of the pie, right? Number of purchasers times the price. You know, total addressable market, service addressable market, whatever. Purchasers times price. Here's what I want you to be careful of. And we see companies get caught in this trap again and again and again. So most of you don't look much at the pap smear market and the colposcopy market, but this is one that I faced with a company a couple years ago, and it was kind of interesting. Entrepreneur. Every gynecologist is going to want this. Everyone. You have no idea how big this market is. You're right, I don't. Tell me about it. There are 55 million pap smears per year in the US only. Wow, sounds big. This is what happened in a half hour. We just kind of picked it apart, and I'm going to do the fast forward version. Well, so yours is going to be replacing your colposcopy that's going to run off the back of an iPhone is going to be used for every single pap smear instead? No, not at that point. It's only going to be used, because pap smears are the gold standard, it's only going to be used when there's an abnormal test. Oh, cool. What percentage of the time are there abnormal tests? About 3.5 million abnormal tests a year. Cool. So your piece of software is going to be used every single time there's an abnormal test. Well, no, not really, because about half the time the physician will order a colposcopy, you know, this extra procedure in gynecology. Okay, cool. So 1.75 million times you're going to be used per year in the US only, right? Well, no, it's not just when they order it, because the woman has to come back and actually get the colposcopy. And it turns out only about 1 million colposcopies are actually scheduled a year where somebody comes back. Really? And then we went back and looked at what the CPT code was for reimbursement from like Medicare, Medicaid kind of thing. What do you get? Turns out the reimbursement is $5 for a colposcopy. So it's like their market size, it's huge. Everybody's going to want it. There's 55 million. Put your hands down. And we went through and we call it the funnel. These are the funnel clouds of the tornado. And it turned out the entire market size in the US, if you got 100% of it, total addressable market was $5 million a year. And we're trying to raise $10 million in venture capital to go after a market that's, if we had 100% of it, and this is like, if we got 10%, okay, that's $500,000 a year. There's like nothing there. So just be careful when you're sizing a market and you're making assumptions to think about your market sizing. Competition, please be careful. I find a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm not sure why, put their head in the sand when it comes to competition. They don't want to look because they don't want to know. So they figure if they don't know and they don't look, there's nothing there. Please do a lot of searching. The number of times I'm sitting there meeting with an entrepreneur, I've got a great idea, it's terrific, and I'll literally like, wait, you mean like this? And I flip my computer around, it's like, this? I'm like, oh, wow, that was pretty quick. So please do your searches. Anybody know how to do Google Advanced Search? It's mostly a technical crowd. Advanced, what are cool things you can do in Advanced Search? I'll tell you what I do. Yeah.
Like last year.
Last year? Yep. Let me tell you my favorite advanced, yep.
You can also get like the number of hits.
Yep, you can get a number of hits, traffic, you can do off-a-site search. Here's my favorite thing when I'm doing competitive analysis. I'll do a search, I just did it the other day. I do whatever I'm looking for, and I do file type PDF or file type XLS for Excel, if people still do an Excel, because all I do is Google Docs these days. But anyway, some people still do. And then I add the words confidential pricing. You can't imagine the shit that drifts on the internet. It is amazing how many proposals I have found or competitors' pricing. And it's literally file type PDF or file type XLS, they're magical, or file type PPT, confidential pricing, and whatever domain I'm in. And it is unbelievable what you can find. So anyway, just use, if you look at advanced search, if you haven't used it for a while, just check out, besides images and stuff like that, you can find some really cool stuff. And there's lots of other things to search on. Okay, we're almost done. As you go through this process of de-risking and thinking through your idea, just remember as risk goes down, funding sources go up. In the beginning, when it's very, very high risk, it's where friends and family, grants, angel, crowdfunding comes in. And then as you start getting towards growth, it evolves. So we're going to talk just a little bit about pitching VCs and stuff. So venture capital, seed capital comes in. Usually it's a little bit de-risked, like where a Dream It comes in. And then eventually, risk goes way down and the company goes public generally. But just think about that. There's this inverse relationship to capital sources or cash sources and risk. If you're going to be speaking with VCs, venture capitalists, just something to keep in mind. Number one, you can date before you get married. A lot of times VCs aren't you hit them once and it's all over. One of the things we talk a lot about Dream It when companies are going out and talking to VCs is try to build relationships. And the line that we use that other people use as well is, remember, it tends to be when you meet with venture capitalists, if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you tend to get money. So we say to Dream It companies, you should go out and ask for a lot of advice. Don't ask for money. Because otherwise you'll get like, well, that won't work. And have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? The other thing I like to think about if you're looking for venture investment, and some of you are in bigger companies, I don't know if this really applies, but if you're looking for venture investment, it's like sales. And don't kid yourself. Pitching venture capitalists, instead of selling your product, you're selling equity in your company. Okay? But you're selling. And one of the things you can do is if you have an early stage idea and you go meet with a VC, you can say to them literally, look, I really appreciate we had a quick cup of coffee. I appreciate your feedback and time. Question for you, if I came back 3, 5, 6, 12 months from now, what would you need to see? Or what do you think VCs in general would need to see to make an investment in something like this? And it's like, I don't know if any of you have ever done sales. It's called trial closing. You can trial close a VC. And they'll say, well, I'd need to see 1, 2, and 3. Really? Those 3 things. Because if I come back 6 months from now and I can show you those things, you're going to write a check? And I mean, you can do that in a kind of playful way. But you want that signal, because they're going to tell you what risks they're worried about. So it's really kind of cool way. But you can ask them, what do you need to see? Okay? We're kind of done here. Here are the key takeaways from this talk, and then I'm happy to stay for a little bit and answer some questions. Key takeaways. It all starts with, what are your most critical 2 to 3 assumptions? Remember, the killer bunny is going to come kill you. It's the Zappos story, Dropbox, was actually testing a similar thing. What is that killer assumption? How do you change those assumptions into knowledge as quickly and as inexpensively as possible? And just try to give you lots and lots of ideas in here, from MVPs to positioning statements to going out and talking to customers to saying to them, by the way, you can't hurt my feelings. There's lots of ways to do this in the early stage and not waste money and time. Those are the things. If you're ever interested in Dream It, we do cool things and we build all kinds of cool companies. Come give us a visit or check out our website. We're in Philly, we're at 34th and Market. We have a location in New York, and we probably will open one more innovation hub later this year. But it's a very interesting 4-month program. It is very hardcore. It is exhausting to go through. You go through a lot, but companies come out in a much better place, and they go raise around when we do our investor roadshow. That's my talk. Again, if you wanted copies of the slide or anything was interesting, there's the bit.ly. It's de-risking this month, the year 04-2016, because there's a couple of changes I made to the deck. You can't download it, but you're welcome to look at it and grab it, and you don't have to take notes. If you have questions, I'm happy to stay around for 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you for your time.
You taking questions?
Yeah, I'm taking questions. Sure.
Your positioning statement
Yes.
is up there.
Yeah.
Were you trying to, is that just for internal organization, sort of internal discussion, and also like pitch that to like in customer development?
Uh-huh.
Or were you saying, or would that be used for something else?
We use it for everything. If I look, let me give you an example of a use of a positioning statement. That'll come back up. If I go to Medium right now for Dream It, right? Here's the current cohort: Adicade, Metsis, Telepathy, Circle Link Health. Each one of these, this is their, especially Adicade's really, Adicade, right? Adicade builds tools to prevent and treat substance abuse and addiction, described as kind of Fitbit meets Facebook. These are all positioning statements. So I'm talking about using them internally in corporations, customers, using it with customers, using it with investors. It's your elevator pitch. It just frames the whole thing very cleanly.
So that's what I was going to ask. Do you think that your elevator pitch should be reshaped into a positioning statement?
Yeah. And I look for elevator pitches at Dream It companies. Their elevator pitch should pretty much hit the core positioning statement elements, right? And when Sam, who's the CEO of Adicade, who's the most brave CEO I know, because she gets up and says, I'm a recovering drug addict, and I created Adicade for people like me. And she goes through and talks about her friend in prison 3 months ago who died from a heroin overdose, and like nearly with tears in her eyes. By the way, if you search an addiction in the iTunes store, she's usually between the top 1 to 3 app already in what she does in drug addiction. So she's trying to sit there and say, my target market is addicts and insurers and self-insured that have addicts within their population who want to get off of these things that, unlike a 12-step program, Addicade does, boom. And she does that with investors, she does that with potential customers. It's really interesting. By the way, it's a big, ugly space that she's going after. This is not, our partners and us were like addiction. We weren't, like diabetes, and we're like addiction. And it's like, you look at it, it's like, wow, that's a big, ugly, ugly problem. Thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I found it's difficult.
Sorry, can you just hold on a second?
To
Sure.
provide the kind of
There you go.
requisite microphone.
Yeah, sorry.
I find it's difficult working with a company that's 15 years old, it's been kind of successful for a while. I tried to bring in some of the Steve Blank type. I mean, I really liked your talk.
Good.
It's really hard
Yep.
to get people like that to actually think in terms of show me the revenue stream. Got these great ideas. Do you have any recommendations for how do you, so in other words, it's not a startup, but we're trying to build new products like a startup.
Sure.
Within a non-startup mentality. It's
Right.
very challenging.
It's just, I just try to challenge the same things. And the problem is when you're in a non-startup, now you're risk averse. You don't want to lose anything, right? You've made so much progress. You don't want to lose anything. It is certainly challenging. I mean, just a drop of a commercial for a split second for Dream It. Dream It runs a program now called Dream It Inside. And we've done it with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We've done it with Singapore Telephone, where they take a team inside the organization and put it in Dream It like a startup. And they go through the same program side by side with the rest of the startups. And we beat the shit out of those people. And we actually were on the phone with a company late last week, a very, very big organization that says, look, we have an innovation team, but all we do is like we smother and kill these people because we need to get them out of our culture. But then we smother and kill them a different way. We just challenge a lot of the assumptions. But it's hard. You just have to get people also to think this way. It's not, and the thinking isn't, this talk I've done a million times. It's not hard to grasp the thinking, but you just need, it's like, is it Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook or they into it some advertising agencies? What would you do if you were brave? If you were really brave and you weren't scared, what would you do? And you have to think that way. But you've got to also dream it. Look, I've done multiple startups. Chris knows when I worked on Packlate and first round invested in it, we put $1.5 million in, and 3 years later, I shut it down. I've had failures. Almost every entrepreneur I know has had failures. It's part of it. It's the risk that you take. You're out on the edge. And you have to have a culture that's like, if you fail, you don't get fired. They're not all going to work. And just as a quick side note, like Google, how many of you are still wearing Google glasses? How many of you, by the way, have you built on top of Orkut, or have you been using Orkut lately? Or you just think, but you know what? I bet you if any of you on your social media strategy involves Google+, right? You all use Google+. It's like they're all failures, but they have lots of successes, but you have to have a culture that accepts failures and experimentation. Other questions? All right, cool. Drinks? Thank you.